Hello and welcome to this episode of Angular Air. We're going to be talking about developing open source Angular libraries today, and I'm joined by two special guests, Jason Dobry, say hello Jason,
Hi.
and Olivier Combe. Say hi
Hi.
Olivier.
Hey guys.
So Jason, and I'm Kent C. Dodds, as always. And so Jason and Olivier have developed some pretty awesome open source libraries, and I also have a library that I'm taking care of at the moment. And so we wanted to take this opportunity to share some of the learnings that we've had as we've been developing these open source libraries. But before we get started, just a couple announcements. The next show is going to be next week. We're doing weekly shows again with Pascal Briggs. I'm so sorry, Pascal. I don't actually know how to say your last name. Olivia can totally relate to that. But yeah, we're going to be talking about I18N with Angular. Some pretty exciting developments since ngconf and with the new version of Angular, and then also Pascal's got Angular Translate. That's way cool. So also, we are totally barren as far as questions for this episode goes, so go to ng-air.github.io and go to our episode, ask any questions as the episode is progressing, and we'll answer any questions that you have by the time or by the end of this episode when we go through those. And as always, again, follow us on Twitter and Google Plus to stay up to date with the latest and greatest. So let's go ahead and jump into things. So we're going to start out and just give a brief intro of each of our libraries, what they do, just give you some context. And each of us has a couple of libraries, and we'll just talk about one, maybe two of them. So let's go ahead and get started with Jason. Can you give us an intro on the library that you built?
So probably one of my first open source projects I ever built was called Angular Cache. It's a replacement for the Angular's Cache Factory, which is one of the default services that comes with Angular. And what Angular Cache is it's a drop-in replacement that adds additional local storage capabilities, and in addition some expiration capabilities, so you can add timeouts and stuff to your cache. So working with Angular Cache was kind of just like the tip of the iceberg as far as working with data. I needed some simple caching. Beyond Angular Cache, I started Angular Data, which was actually inspired by Ember Data. I really liked how Ember Data had this goal of simplifying data management in the app for the user. Unfortunately for me, Ember Data seemed a little restrictive on what it supported, and so with Angular Data, I wanted to bring to Angular the model layer that I thought was missing. And Angular Data, what it does is it has a core in-memory data store with which you can define resources that map to perhaps the resources you have on your back end. Maybe a resource maps to a particular table in your database. And then what the data store does is it uses adapters, and the adapters abstract away from the database or the data store the particulars of retrieving data from various persistence layers. So there's an adapter for HTTP. You can use that to hit your RESTful endpoints. There's local storage, localForage, and those are the only ones I had built with Angular Data originally. Now, Angular Data got posted to Hacker News before it was 1.0, and someone on the thread on Hacker News was like, "Why is this an Angular library?" And I thought to myself, you know what? There isn't really a whole lot in this library that is Angular specific, so I ripped out about 95% of the code that was non-Angular, and I created JS Data. And JS Data is framework agnostic. It's just VanillaJS, and you can use it with any framework. Imagine switching from Ember to Angular or from Angular to React and being able to take your data layer with you. Now, I've written a whole bunch more adapters, so there are adapters for Firebase, and since JS Data runs on the server as well, I have written adapters for SQL-like databases, RethinkDB, Redis, MongoDB, and so it's really kind of taking off as far as that goes. Now, with JS Data, the data store, the in-memory data store is how you interact with your data using synchronous methods, and then asynchronous methods delegate to adapters. And since the data store, you just plug adapters into the data store, and you're using the same API to retrieve data, regardless of the data source that it's coming from, whether you're getting it from localForage or whether you're pulling it from your RESTful server or Firebase. And so the data store creates a really easy, quick to set up data store model layer for your front end app. And it has a whole bunch of extra features, like you can define custom instance methods on the data that gets put into the store. You can define relationships, and JS data will automatically link up your data together. Your belongs to, has many relations, and things like that. You can do computed properties, and it has model lifecycle hooks and all kinds of stuff. You should check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, getting posted to Hacker News before you're quite ready with the library is a blessing and a curse, right?
I was like, oh no, I better fix that bug.
Yeah, that happened to the Ionic guys. We talked to them last week, and they're like, oh crap, we're not ready, but yeah, it works out anyway, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. Awesome library. I actually use it at work. I've used it on a couple of projects, and I can attest that it's terrific. Yeah, love that. So, yeah, great. Olivier, why don't you tell us a little bit about ocLazyLoad?
Yep. About 1 year ago, I started I was working on an application that was getting really big at work, and we wanted to strip out everything that we didn't need right away so that it would load faster. And I was trying to find a way to do that with Angular, and couldn't find any easy way to do it. I searched for like 2 days, and there were a bunch of articles about keeping hang of the providers and stuff like that. But nothing was very simple. And then I found an article, I think, I don't know the name of the website, but it's a big website in Russia. And the guy had a library that was just a proof of concept to LazyLoad stuff. And I wanted to use that, so I tried it, but there was no documentation. And I finally managed to do something with it. And by the end of the week, I had changed almost everything except the core loading part. And I decided that since there was nothing available to do that, I could just write my own library. So I tried to contact the guy, but he didn't answer. So I set up a repo on GitHub so that I could add this as a dependency for my project. And I started working on it, and I wrote an article on a blog, and in fact it's the only article on my blog. Yeah, it was cool because it was a complex idea, and there were no other libraries that could do that at the time. So I started to post it on Twitter and stuff like that, and people responded well. They found it easy to use, so it was a good motivation to work on this. And then I just kept working on it because it was useful, and I still use it in many of my projects. The main goal of this library is to easily let you load anything. So you can load Angular components, but you can also load Bootstrap, for example, or other libraries that are not Angular specific. And then you can use it to load the CSS. And I added also the templates from Angular. And yeah, you can use it to load it in many different ways, because I didn't want to force people to use it my way, and I found out by using it that sometimes just the simple calling the simple function wasn't enough. So I added a directive, and then I tried to make it work with the router and stuff like that. And So now you can pretty much use it the way you want. If you think that you should load it this way, it should work. And if it's not working, you should tell me, and I can make it work. Yeah. So the point is making lazy loading easy, and so that you don't have to worry about it. Just load your stuff, and it should work like it should have worked with Angular in the first place. Yeah.
Cool. So you've got a cat in there.
Yeah.
Nice. So you were also, or I guess your library was fortunate to get featured on Egghead by John Lindquist, the man himself. So that's pretty cool. How did that happen? Like, did you tell him about it, or like what happened there?
I think that it really took off when Angular newsletter wrote something about it. I was monitoring the stats on GitHub because it was a brand new feature on GitHub, and I saw a big spike, it was like, I don't know, maybe 10 views a day, and suddenly 2,000 one day. So I tried to find out what was the reason, and someone on Twitter told me that it was in Angular newsletter. And then many people discovered my library this way. I think it's how they found it, how John Lindquist found it. But I don't know. I should ask him one day. Anyway, I saw a tweet. I was monitoring keywords on Twitter with my libraries. So I found a tweet on ocLazyLoad. I saw that it was something on Egghead. I didn't know Egghead at the time. I found out later that it was a really cool website. And yeah, I don't know. He didn't ask me. He just did the video, and I saw it. I asked him if he could maybe give me an access to see it, because it was pro content only. And he gave me a free account on Egghead.
Nice.
No, I have a free account for life, I think. So that's cool. And yeah, the videos are really awesome. I've learned stuff about my lib in this, and yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I think you learn a lot by the way that other people use your library.
Yes.
So that's cool.
I try to read as much as I can. I monitor the keywords on Twitter and on Stack Overflow, and I try to answer people when I can. Maybe not immediately, but within 1 or 2 days, if I can.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'll just quickly go through my library, give a brief overview. So about a year and a half ago or so, I think it was just about a year ago, I was moonlighting for a company that was just a big CRUD app, like tons of forms throughout the entire application. And so I was like, I've got to come up with some way to deal with all this HTML, because I don't want to have to make directives for every single little thing. And yeah, I wanted something that would make it consistent throughout the app. And so I searched around for a long time and fell upon Angular formally. And at the time, it just supported Bootstrap, but that was okay because that's what I was using. And so yeah, so I just started using it, and then I needed to conditionally hide a field based on the value of another field, and so I looked at the implementation. It was actually fairly simple, surprisingly, and I figured out what would I need to do to add this feature, and I posted an issue and said, hey, is this something you're interested in? And if I made a pull request, would you accept it? They were like, yeah, sure, that'd be awesome. So I submitted a pull request. We talked about it a little bit. It got merged. And then time went on, and I needed another feature, and so we added. I made another pull request, and after making a couple of pull requests, the maintainer, his name's Grant, and he made it for his company Nimbly. They were using it for one of their clients, I think. and they said, hey, you're making a lot of contributions, and as much as we love merging your pull requests, I think you know this library better than we do. Let's just make you a collaborator, and you can do whatever. And then that eventually resulted in me getting publish access on NPM, and so now it's basically my library, and it's very different from what it was at the time, in hopefully only good ways. But basically, that's that's how I came to that's how I came to own the Angular Formally library, and it kind of, I guess, developed some popularity just from me being excited about it on Twitter. I also was on the Angular Air podcast about forums in general, and I mentioned Angular Formally, and I think that got it some recognition. And then I spoke at NGNL in the Netherlands, the Angular conference there, about Angular Formally, and also did a training at ngconf about Angular Formally. So getting myself out there, and also at meetups as well, is kind of how I guess this library has taken off, and it's just been a ton of fun to work with. Developing open source is a blast. So yeah, that's and maybe just for some context, I guess, Angular Formally goes for a more imperative approach, and so instead of using a bunch of HTML and repeating yourself all over the place, you define a set of templates. So you say, hey, Angular Formally, this is what an input looks like, and then in your JavaScript you say, I want a field here and I want it to be an input, and then Formally will look up, oh, okay, I know what an input looks like, you told me, and so I'll use that one, and then you specify what model it has and different things like that. And so, yeah, so that's the idea behind Angular Formally. So let's go ahead and move on. Now, what we really want to try to accomplish with this episode, for you, the listener or viewer, is we want to inspire you, hopefully, to take that idea that you've had and build it into something awesome that can contribute to the community as an open source library. And so, based on our experiences, we just like to give you that inspiration. So my first question for all of us is, what is, and this is kind of a general question, but what is it like to open or to maintain an open source library for free?
Well, it's taking a lot of time. The difficult part, I think, is to be able to have your life, because you work so all day usually, and then at night you work on your library and stuff. If you do too much, you will burn out, I think. So you have to take some time for you. I love coding. It's what I do for fun, but I also have other stuff and my wife and stuff like that. So you have to be able to work and to keep up on the issues and the pull requests and stuff, but you also have to take some free time for yourself.
What do you think, Jason?
Working on open source projects, I think all at the same time it can be exhausting, very rewarding, humbling, and frustrating. It is open source, and it is your free time that's going into maintaining the project. So the rewarding part is when you've solved a problem and you've shared that solution with others, and it's, I think, very rewarding to see your solution helping other people. When you hear about someone using your library and you're like, wow, that's so cool that you're using my library, like, I can't believe like someone thought it would be worth it, like, that's so rewarding. The frustrating part is, unfortunately, sometimes people maybe feel entitled to get more of your free time than you have to give, and so maybe that can be a little frustrating when they are perhaps clogging up your issue tracker, saying, you know, or demanding a feature like, shame on you, how come you haven't implemented this yet? It's like, well, darn it, I spend my free time working on this, and you're welcome to help, but so it kind of goes back and forth between being rewarding and sometimes a little frustrating.
Jason, am I that guy who's requiring more of your free time?
No,
I think sometimes I might be that guy.
Taking you as an example, a lot of times before you even post an issue, you yourself will have gone and looked at the source code and even already have suggestions on the changes that can be made. And I can say that is very helpful as someone who has written a lot of. I have probably 20 or 30 projects on GitHub. That when someone takes the time to actually do a little research before they post, that I think I'm very grateful when people do that. So I would recommend anybody do that. If you have an issue, do a little research, maybe find a stack trace or come up with like a plunker or a JS fiddle that demonstrates the issue. It makes the life of the open source maintainer so much easier.
Yes, please, plunkers.
Yeah, totally. I've actually for my repo I have a JS bin template that people can clone, and it's all set up. All you need to do is just add the pieces that you think are broken or are having difficulties with, and then that I totally agree. That makes it super easy. And actually, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but I think it's Sindre Sorhus. Yeah, Olivier is not even said. I think that's right. But anyway,
yeah.
He tweeted just like yesterday that one of the best things that you can do when submitting an issue is instead of submitting an issue, you submit a pull request that has a failing test. That would be awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that would be way, way cool. So, I agree with you, Jason. I think, and Olivier too, actually, this is your free time, and it, I love coding. I love coding. And so I really like having an excuse to work on something, especially when other people find it useful. So you almost feel like you try to, or I sometimes think how many hours of time, of developers' time have I saved just because I spent a little bit of time working to make their lives easier, and that is rewarding. That's just way cool. And if you haven't had that opportunity, I suggest that you find something that you've worked on and solve a problem that you've solved, and see how you can abstract away your implementation details and turn it into something that other people can use. And we will thank you for it. I think it's just so rewarding. Go do it. Just do it. It's great. It's just a lot of fun. So let's talk a little bit about dealing with issues that people find or contributions. So issues and pull requests. What has your guys' experience been like with those kinds of things?
I think one of the best things I did was when I made a really strong distinction between something that should go on the mailing list and something that should be an issue on GitHub. Because with the issues on GitHub, those are perhaps people found a bug in your library, or they have a feature request. That's a great place to put a GitHub issue. But when it's simply either they don't understand the documentation, or I didn't do a good enough job on the documentation, and so they just are misunderstanding how they should do something or what's the best approach for solving a certain problem. Those are really questions that belong on the mailing list, that the community can help answer those questions. And perhaps something that gets posted on the mailing list is going to lead to a GitHub issue. But for my peace of mind and being able to stay organized on which one is actually a bug and which one is actually just helping a guy understand how to use the library in a certain way, keeping that distinction and that organization, I think, helps move the project forward and it becomes clearer to consumers of the project what's going on with the project.
I should do that. Actually,
I was thinking the same thing. I need to set up a mailing list. Gitter is really, really awesome, but mailing list would be nice because people would get emails and stuff.
Yeah, I use GitHub labels to do that. I have a lot of labels such as questions, I need to check, or bug and stuff like that, and I try to keep it up to date so that I quickly find out, and others can also quickly find out if something should be addressed or if it's just a discussion. Yeah.
So, Jason, do you have, and actually, Olivier, that's kind of what I do right now as well, and I also have the Gitter, which is also very helpful. But Jason, do you have people on your mailing list who are answering other people's questions and stuff? Like, do you have a community that is helping?
Yeah, sometimes they will answer each other's questions. I think maybe a mistake I've made is I answer questions too fast, so maybe I don't give anyone else an opportunity to answer. So I'm wondering if I should just maybe scale it back a little, like, and give other people an opportunity to answer. The problem is I'm so paranoid that I maybe put out a piece of broken code that I just want to make sure it works, and so I just jump on things too fast. I use the GitHub labels as well. There's also, I try and make sure that the issues have a good status as to like where it is in the process of being worked on or being talked about or needs contribution. One thing that I found from the Capistrano repository, that's it's a tool for deploying like Ruby apps and things like that. The author and maintainer of Capistrano got so popular that he was just absolutely overwhelmed by the amount of issues. So he does this thing where if someone submits an issue on GitHub and the issue says something like, this thing doesn't work, period, and like that's the whole issue. It's like, how is that supposed to really help the maintainer? So what he does is he immediately closes the issue, and then in the comment where he closes the issue, he says, I'm going to close this issue because I'm not really sure that this is a bug. But if you, as the issue submitter, really think that this is a bug, here are some things you can provide when you reopen the issue. And he says, and this is what I do now, and I say, it'd be great if you could provide me with like the versions of the library that you're using, maybe like some stack traces or logs that came out on the console, or maybe some code examples that led to the issue. What would be even better than that would be an actual demonstration of the issue. Perhaps like a failing test or a plunker or JS fiddle that shows the issue. But the absolute best thing you could do is submit a pull request that fixes the issue.
Do you have a contributing file, contributing.md?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Although sometimes I think people will submit issues without clicking on the little link, like your contribution guidelines. But man, like I still I like Jason, you say that you like to just answer right away. I feel the exact same way. Like if I'm in the middle of something, or like even I hate to admit this, but sometimes when I'm at home, with my kids or something, and I get like an email or something, like how do I do this thing? I'm just thinking like, how can I wrap this up so that I can go like answer their question or whatever, or maybe I can just pause really quick and just respond, just because I think there's a rush when somebody's actually trying to use your library, and for some reason they're having difficulty, or they're just misunderstanding. It's just really you just want to help people use your library correctly.
Yeah, probably because we've all had those kind of issues where sometimes we don't know something and it just stops you in your development. And if the maintainers could answer quickly, it would help you a lot. But then they don't, and sometimes you get an email like 1 year later, and the guy say, "Oh, so the answer was that. Oh yeah, I have changed. I don't use your library."
Totally.
So yeah, that's why I try also to answer issues as fast as I can, and people are usually really impressed that I can answer in like 1 minute after they posted it. But even if I don't have the time, I tell them, yeah, that's probably a bug or something. I will take a look at it tomorrow night, and they're happy with that because they know that they don't have to search. They can keep searching, but they don't have to. Someone will help them on this, and they can move on and do other stuff and maybe come back later.
Yeah, totally. One thing that I've done with like triaging issues and stuff, it is really helpful if people give like a JS bin or something to reproduce the issue. But if it's just like a question like how do I do this or something, or even if it is like I think this is a bug and they haven't created a JS bin like I wish that they would, then I will go and create it. And the website for Angular formally is actually there's the main page. It's just a couple or a list of all the features and whatever, like overview of how to use the lib. But the rest of it is just a bunch of JS bin examples, and so you can like filter through them, like how do I do this or whatever, and it'll show you an example. And that was like one of the best decisions that I made for the library, because now somebody says how do I do this, I go and make an example, and then I add it to that list of examples on the website, and so future generations will be able to come back and see how we solved like the complex grid layout or how to hide specific fields based on other conditions and different things like that. Yeah, I think live examples that people can play around with is super valuable. And
Yes.
I've closed many an issue about questions just by saying, here's an example, let me know if this doesn't answer it for you. And yeah, most of the time it's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I added a bunch of links in my README, and it's on my to-do list to do a website like that, because a library is just as good as the documentation that you provide. When you search for some feature and some library you can solve your problem, usually you open like 10 tabs, and then you check the README, and you see that maybe there are 2 lines, and another project has like a full web page with a lot of help, and you will choose this library because you don't want to lose your time. Maybe the first one is really good, but yeah, you shouldn't have to read the source code to know what to do.
Yeah, Jason's got the corner on the market with documentation.
I've probably tried 10 different documentation tools, just trying to find the right one that was the easiest to maintain, because writing documentation takes a lot of work. I mean, it takes almost as much work as writing the library itself. So what I've finally settled on that I'm really enjoying for JS data is readme.io. It's a service that they'll give you a free account if you're doing open source projects, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. And so for some of the smaller projects of mine, I'll just put all the documentation right in the README, and then kind of like what you were saying, Kent. If I hear a certain question maybe multiple times, I ask myself, okay, what is it in my documentation that was insufficient that has caused this question to be raised multiple times for multiple people? So then that's a point where you can go improve the documentation or add another example or a guide for this one thing, because it turns out to be a common use case that people run into. But I agree, a library is only as good as its documentation, because when you put a library out there, it's going to be used by all kinds of developers. You know, people who have been programming for 20 years who could just read your source code and understand it immediately. And then there are going to be new developers who are going to be trying to start their very first project ever, and they want to be able to use your library. And for them, they're going to need documentation to get them pointed in the right direction, and so they can get rolling with their project. So I also would I really appreciate when people make suggestions on improvements for documentation, and that's one place where readme.io shines, is that when you're reading a particular piece of documentation, you can make suggestions on the docs, which you can kind of do similar things with like wikis and docs like that. Yeah, documentation is tough. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, I need to jump onto that readme.io boat. I actually emailed them, and they said that they'd be happy to give me a free account for the library, but then I got stuck because they require a logo, and I don't have a logo for Angular formally yet. There is an issue on GitHub. If you want to make a pull request, that would be sweet.
Yeah, you tweeted about it.
Yeah, still waiting for that. I'm not a designer. But yeah, so right now documentation for formally is just all in the README, and like that's a little tough, especially like when it comes to trying to maintain that and everything. What's nice about that though is it's versioned, and so like say you make a big breaking change and everything changes, whatever, people can still go back to the old one. And I think README.io actually is versioned as well, right?
It is versioned.
So that's pretty awesome. One other thing that I think, as far as like helping people use your library, one thing that I've done that I think has been really useful is I make warnings in the console or even throw errors when people are doing things that or using the library incorrectly. And actually, Jason, I know JS Data does this because I use your library wrong all the time. But I think that's really valuable, and I think it's so valuable that I looked at React's prop types, which are amazing, really well, or a really good API for defining the API of your component. And I took that and I created APIcheck.js, which is another library that I maintain, and formally, Angular formally depends on this library, and basically it's like React's prop types but without React, and you kind of define the API to your function. So you say, hey, this function takes argument or takes options, and the options object looks like this. It has to have these properties. It can't have any more. And these properties have these types and stuff. So when people call my functions or if they use my directives, then they get a warning saying, hey, you put the label field or you put a label property in here. You're not supposed to do that. And so then it'll even have a link that they can click on, and it goes right into the repo in an errors and warnings.md markdown file. That will explain, hey, if you're looking at this, this is probably why. Here's how you fix it. And once I implemented stuff like that, I started getting far fewer issues on GitHub. That was a huge help. Like, make your library teach your users how to use your library.
Yep. Have one of you tried dgenie, the documentation maker from Angular?
dgenie? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's what they use to create the documentation based on ngdoc, the commands in their source code.
I've used something similar. I used a project called Docular for the original Angular data, and Docular was based on Angular's documentation generator. I switched away from that because it was hardly being maintained at all or improved.
Yeah. Well, dgenie is a project by the Google team, so it's maintained, but Pete Bacon-Darwin is working on this, and I think that they're trying to make it more generic, because when you try to use it, if you don't know how it works, it's really hard because they don't have a lot of documentation.
Right.
Well, no, they are working on this, so it's getting better. It's getting better, yeah. But yeah, I will in fact probably talk about that at Amsterdam GoToCon. It's in my list of tools. It's really powerful once it's set up. And yeah, it's something that people don't know about, but it's used by Ionic, by Angular, by a bunch of other big projects. Maybe it's not suited for a small library, but for big stuff like maybe Angular Translate and stuff like that, it's really useful. Yeah.
Cool. We'll have to look into that. If you could shoot me a link, I'll put it into the show notes.
Sure.
So one other thing I wanted to talk about that I think would be really useful for people who are looking to start building a library is there are tons of build tools out there, and none of them is the wrong answer. But I'm curious to know what you guys use for building your libraries and deploying your libraries. Like, do you use UMD, or are you just like CommonJS, or are you just global? Like, how do you deploy your libraries?
Um, with JS data, for example, the code base is so large that I've split it into quite a few different files, just so it makes it easier to understand the organization of the source code and where things are coming from. So that means it has to get built into a final distributable file. I was using Browserify for a while, but the UMD support wasn't working quite as well as I hoped it would, so I got introduced to Webpack, and so now I use Webpack to build most of my libraries. And since I use some NPM modules that get pulled into the library, it makes it very simple to consume those dependencies in my own project, and then it gets built up into that final file for me. The task runner I use is Grunt. I just use it because I haven't ever felt the need to switch. I'm sure Gulp or Broccoli, can just do all the same stuff just as well. One issue is Webpack gave me great UMD support, so if someone wants to consume JS data as a simple script tag that they load on their page, they can do that. It'll get put on the window. If they want to consume it with CommonJS or CommonJS 2 or AMD, they can do that, and they can load it just fine. So that's what I use for the UMD is Webpack. Webpack is awesome.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day, Kent, and you told me about Webpack as well. I'm actually rewriting the whole library, and I've switched to, well, I use a Gulp task to build my stuff, but I've added a bunch of stuff now, Babel being one of them, and well, it's all handmade. I usually have one good file that I copy paste between my projects, and I just change a few stuff, but not so much. And then I use I have custom tasks that will release a new version. For example, I just type gulp release, and it will ask me if I want a minor, a patch minor, or a major upgrade, and it will generate the changelog. It will compile and build up the stuff, do the test before, and then I just have to commit my stuff. It's all already prepared.
Well, that's pretty cool. So how does it generate the changelog? Is it based off of commits since the last release?
Yeah. I use something that's made by I don't remember his name. Some guy from Ionic who works on Angular material as well.
Andrew?
Yeah, Andrew. Thanks. Yeah, he made a GitHub project for that. It's something that is based on the Angular syntax. They have a doc somewhere in their documentation that gives you how to write the commits. So you have to give the type of commits, such as doc, fit for feature, fix for fix, and so on. And then you add your changelog, and then you add your message, and then using this library, it will get all the commits and sort them by type, and then by subtype, because you can add subtypes, and it will just generate a regular stuff with features, bug fixes, and breaking changes, and it's really cool. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds pretty awesome. I always admired the way that Angular does their stuff. I didn't realize that was something that was open source that we could use. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really easy to use once you have the discipline to write your message, your commit message, how they should be written, and in fact they have a pre-commit hook that you can add to your project so that you can't commit if you don't write the message how it should be written. So after that, it's really easy to use.
Cool. So yeah, I think I had a thought and now it's gone. But so what kind of I think we're kind of winding down on our time, but I wanted to ask what what tips would you give to somebody, like, say, here I am, Joe Schmo here, and I have this thing that I built at work, and it's working really well. I've talked to my boss, and he's like, yeah, sure, we want a presence out in the open source community. Go ahead and make that open source. What are some of the things that you would suggest to me if this is my first ever open source library?
Keep your ego in check. People will find bugs in your library. Don't feel too bad about it.
In fact, it's a good thing. It will help you.
Yeah. Also, one thing that I think is a difficulty when you release an open source project is just keeping a hold of, or keeping track of the scope of the project, because people are going to come to your project and they're going to have a use case that is not immediately solvable by your project, but they think it's really close, and so a lot of times they'll suggest a feature. And so if an open source maintainer were to merge every single feature request, it could potentially bloat the library and change the scope of the scope of the project that it originally had. So this is a challenge I frequently encounter with JS data, because working with your data that you're pulling from your backend is, everybody does it, and so there are a million use cases. So trying to solve the problem generally to tackle as many use cases as possible without going down the rabbit hole of a particular use case is quite difficult. So if you can, when you release an open source project for the first time, I think I would recommend this to anybody. Make sure you have documented somewhere, maybe on the README or in an issue that just stays open, like the driving philosophies and scope of the project, and like the reasons that you're building the project, and what goals you have, and what kind of problems you want it to be able to solve. And that can be used as a guideline when trying to maintain scope, because if every feature ever always got merged, all of the libraries would be hundreds and hundreds of kilobytes in size and do so many different things and become messy, unmaintainable beasts. So keeping track of scope, I think, by having like a mission statement for the project is I think something I would recommend to any person who wants to release an open source project.
Yep, I agree. You need to have a vision of how it should help and how it will become when you have the time to add all the other things that you want to add, but you have to sometimes say no.
You do have to say no.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I'm sorry, but one thing that you can do to help that is that you can make your stuff modular, so that they can maybe write or add their own features easily. That's what I'm trying to do right now when I'm rewriting my library, because I want others to be able to consume my functions, but maybe add them in their bigger stuff. I don't know what they want to do, and they should be able to just hook up into the process whenever they want, and maybe overwrite a few stuff if they need.
I was just going to say, I think that's valuable, and I totally agree. You want to maintain scope, and then at the same time, and it is difficult, but you want to make sure that like your stuff isn't so general that it's not useful, but then also that it's general enough to be useful to many people, and it's just a really difficult balance. But making it or giving people the ability to override behaviors for, like, if that makes sense for the context of your library, I think it is very valuable. And so, yeah. And one other tip I wanted to give to anybody thinking about open sourcing a library is don't wait until the library is totally ready before you make your repo on GitHub. Like, that should be the first thing that you do. And don't worry about naming your library. I just released a library called Moxie. It's a terrible name. Like, I don't. And I'm working on another library called Modular Angular. That's also a terrible name. Rename things. Like, that's not a problem. Don't get hung up on naming. Don't get hung up on, well, this isn't really ready. And just release a 1.0 and say, hey, it's a work in progress. And then use Semver and, oh, like, I totally made the wrong assumption there. now it's a 2.0, and that's okay. And just make it clearly documented. Hey, this is a work in progress. I'm still working on this. I hope you find it useful. And if people don't find it useful right now, then that's fine. They'll find it useful later, or maybe not at all. But at least like the most useless project is the one that was never started. And so just like make your project, release your thing. And I've had projects where like I'll just make a GitHub repo and I'll start working on the project, but I won't actually pollute the npm or Bower namespace because I don't know if this is actually going to be a thing. And then I'll wait until, okay, yeah, this is a thing, and I'll put it on Bower and npm so people can install it. But like, it's okay if you wait on that because people can just npm install from a GitHub repo anyway. So yeah, I would just say like if you're thinking about it, just do it, and then you'll be inspired to make it a real thing, and it'll be helpful to you.
Yeah. Hey, Kent. I wanted to point out that we have a question.
Nice, sweet. Before we get into the questions, we'll take a look at those in just a sec. But does anybody have anything else? I think we are about done with our time. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add before we get into questions?
I just wanted to add that you have to think when you open source a library, you have to think that it's a commitment, and you have also to decide who will be the maintainer, because if you just want to, I don't know, you think you're well, maybe it will be the opposite of what you just said. But I think that if you just want to give your stuff because it can help people, you can just make a gist. If you want to maintain something, if you want to put it on GitHub, you have to think that you will need to keep it up to date. Otherwise, you should write in the README that you want to maintain this project and they can fork it, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's also why if I just start something, I'm like, maybe this will be useful. I disagree with polluting the npm or Bower namespace. I don't think you should put something on there unless you feel like this could be useful to more people than just me. But like, I think too many projects are never started because you just don't. Like, you're worried that it's not going to be useful to anybody, but just put it up on GitHubs, and that will inspire you, and then if somebody finds it, they will inspire you, and then you can put it up on npm and make the consumability of your library easier. But sweet. Okay, are we all done? Are we ready to get into the questions?
Yep. I think so.
Okay, sweet. So we do have one question. And it is by Ronald from the Netherlands. Did I meet you, Ronald? Maybe I did. Maybe well, I don't know. I'll have to go find you, but or tweet me. Okay, so his question is: in Angular 2, there are a lot of changes. How do you, as a library author, prepare for such fundamental changes? I'll go ahead and answer this one for myself really quick. So for Angular formally. Yeah, there are a ton of changes in Angular 2, and Angular formally, the core library has just a couple of small directives, and then there are a couple of services and stuff as well. And then we have template libraries that are a lot more involved with the templates. So pretty much all of those template libraries are going to be, like, in large part rewritten to be able to support Angular 2, which is kind of a bummer, but I'm not too worried about it. The one thing that's nice about a library, though, is the only person who needs to worry about the migration of, like, for me, the only person that needs to worry about forms migration for Angular is me. And so anybody who uses Angular formally, hopefully, like, the changes in Angular 2 won't be so fundamental that I'll have to change my API very significantly. And if I don't have to change my API very significantly, and I've looked at it a little bit, I don't think I will, then the migration path for you with your forms, if you're using formally, will be very minimal. And you'll just have to update your custom templates likely. So that's really nice. But what about you guys? How do you prepare for Angular 2?
Well, my case is easy because my library solves the problem with Angular 1, and it will be totally useless in Angular 2. So
Yay!
I will write other stuff. I don't know.
Is there like a use? Because my library actually will also likely be rendered pretty useless in Angular 2. Because I've talked with Victor a little bit about the new Forms API, and they're going to have both a declarative and an imperative approach, which is awesome. But the nice thing is that I can kind of shield users from the upgrade path, and so they can just keep using Formally and then upgrade to the new API whenever like after they upgrade to Angular 2. Is there any like are you thinking about doing some sort of helper for the upgrade path at all?
Well, I don't know. No, I don't think it's. You will just use import or require stuff like that. You won't really need mylib, I think. So, well,
that's awesome. It's nice to be rendered useless.
Yeah, it's a good thing. But they're adding stuff for lazy loading in Angular 1.5, so I will support that. I've discussed a lot about it with on GitHub. They have a thread where you can add your ideas, and I'm happy to say that they really listened to me and they changed some stuff to make it easier for all libs. Mine and Gitski, if you know him. He has a library for lazy loading stuff as well. So yeah, you have to involve yourself in the discussions. The Google team is really open, and you can make your suggestions. They will listen. So that's one way to prepare for a change, is to make the change be as you wish it could be, and then you just have to change your lib maybe to take these changes into account. But yeah, they try to keep the compatibility as much as possible, so it's usually not a problem.
What about you, Jason? For you, it's a little different, right?
It is different. JS data itself doesn't have to worry about a migration whatsoever because it's not an Angular library. There is JS data Angular, which is a wrapper around JS data, which plugs it into certain things like the promise service in Angular and Angular's HTTP service, and like the digest cycle and things like that. So Angular, JS data Angular, I will have to look at migrating for that. But I think I'm echoing, I think it was Brad Green in last year's ngconf. He said, so you want to write an Angular library? For most cases, the answer is don't do it, because you can write the library without it being tied to Angular, without it being so coupled to Angular's like module system, for example, that no one else can use it except Angular people. So with Angular 2.0 moving a lot closer, I mean, it's written in ES6 and it's using like the new module system that is being agreed upon by the community. I would say if you want to make your library accessible to as many people as possible and to prepare for changes coming in Angular 2.0, write your library in ES6 and make it a more framework agnostic library that is also compatible with Angular. For some things like Angular Formally, it's only about dealing with forms in Angular, so obviously that's an Angular library. But just before you maybe write a library, just take into consideration, like, is this something that is only useful to someone who's writing in Angular, or is this something that I can solve for anybody using any framework? And then, perhaps to make it work better with Angular, I could just add like a simple little wrapper for Angular that like registers it with the dependency injector or something like that. Or maybe that's so simple that I'll just let people do it themselves. And so, I mean, you can find lots of libraries like that where you can just use a third-party library that has nothing to do with Angular, and you can integrate it with your Angular app without much deal. So, like, JS data is now written in ES6. It uses UMD, so it's consumable by many module loaders, and I will have minimal work when it comes time to make sure I support Angular 2, and I think that's by virtue of me making a framework agnostic library as opposed to an Angular specific library. One added benefit of making a framework agnostic library is that the pool of contributors that is available to you is much larger, because there are a lot of people in the world who don't use Angular. They use Ember or React or Knockout or Backbone, and if they can use your library as well, you're going to have a much larger pool of people who can help you make your library as best as it can be. And then if you need to worry about making it compatible with Angular, you can do that as an extra thing on top of your framework agnostic library.
Wise words. Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, there are several form generators for Angular apps. Mine is only one of the many that are quite popular. And one guy, one author of one of these form generators, got all of us together to stop working on the same thing in different places and try to get us to work together. And that has amounted to a VanillaJS forms solution that is currently being worked on by several of us. One of us in particular, that one of us is not me. But it's called Forms.js. It's on GitHub. You can go take a look at it. Brian Vaughn has done like an insane amount of work on it already. It's way cool. So, and then following that same pattern as JS Data, just having adapters for the different libraries. I think that's a very smart way to go about things for all the reasons that you mentioned. Here. So, all right. Any other questions or anything you guys would like to say before we ask our final question?
Yeah, I have a special request. I didn't warn you about, so you don't have to do it if you don't want. I'm really curious, and I'd like to see your workplace, or maybe just turn the webcam in your room.
Yeah, sure.
And see
I can
how it
show
is.
you really quick. So this is, oh, whoops. Yeah, this is, well, yeah, there's not much interesting. Over there is our kitchen and stuff, stocked full of food and whatever. We've got our support guys who are back over there, but I can't really show you. And I'm not going to take the mic around with me to the whole office, but it's a great place to work. Actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we are hiring a UI developer. I'm the only UI developer here at Alianza, and it's awesome. And we're using the latest and greatest. We're on the latest Angular, latest stable version of Angular, and we're using Webpack and ES6 and all this greatness. And so, yeah, if you're interested in working with me, I would love to talk to you. So please tweet me or something, because we're looking for somebody right now. So.
In the spirit of shout-outs, I'll give a shout-out to my company where I work. I work at Lendio. That's Lendio. We're a marketplace for small business loans. It just got announced today that we just closed a round of funding of $20.5 million.
Congratulations.
We are growing really fast. We use a lot of the latest technologies. We have a Node stack. We just rewrote one of our stacks in ES6. We're going to be using like Webpack to LazyLoad the SAS files and the images and the templates and all that stuff. So we really like to work on the cutting edge. We have a great dev team. And if any of you out there are a small business and you're looking for loans, come find us, because that's what we specialize in.
In which country? USA?
United States.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I feel entitled to talk about my company as well.
Go for it.
I just started in a small startup that's named Olimetrics, and we do TV analytics. So we measure stuff on TV, and then we measure things on your website, and we can tell you if your ads on TV really have an impact on your website, and a lot of other stuff, complicated stuff. But we can tell you if your ads are really useful or if they are not, and which channels you should use for your target. So yeah, we are a small startup, and we are looking for talented developers as well. So it's in Lyon, in France. If there is anybody there looking for a job and who's good, tell me about it.
Cool. I'm actually glad that you mentioned that because I've been meaning to get everybody to plug their company for just a little bit on the show, so that's good. Sweet. Okay, so we have one final question, then the show's over, unless you have any other comments. And the question is, and this is for everybody, what tip would you give a brand new developer? So, Jason, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Don't give up. When it comes to programming, there is an absolute universe of knowledge out there. If you wanted to be good at everything, you could never do it in a lifetime. So don't be too daunted by the task of learning new languages or frameworks or understanding programming principles, because there is a lot to learn. And maybe some people forget what it was like to be a new developer, and so maybe they're not as friendly to newer developers who are just learning. But I would say don't give up, because if you're programming at all, it's probably because you like to solve problems and you're creative that way. And if it's something you like to do, you should pursue it no matter what.
Good answer. Olivier?
I would say just dare. Don't hesitate. If you want to do something, do it. Maybe someone else did it as well, but you can always make your own implementation, and you shouldn't be afraid to ask. Usually in Angular, but in the web, people are really open and they like to chat. You can use Twitter, you can send mails. Don't hesitate. Just ask questions. That's how you will become better. Maybe you think that your question is dumb, but like 10,000 people will search it on Google later and find your question on Stack Overflow. It will help them. So yeah, if you don't know something, just ask, and a lot of people will help you.
Awesome. My tip is if you're doing front-end dev specifically, sign up for the JavaScript Weekly, HTML Weekly newsletters. Those are really good sources of information, curated lists of some of the cool things that are going on. I think it's valuable to stay up with some of the things that are going on in this industry. So yeah, I would recommend as a tip for a new developer, or any developer really, if you're not subscribed to those newsletters, as well as NG newsletter if you're an Angular person. Maybe more generally, just find a newsletter, somebody who's creating a curated list of things that I think that can be very valuable, kind of give you interesting things to look at and play around with. So, all right, guys, I think we're wrapped up here. Do you have any last words for our viewers?
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, and please submit PRs on issues and stuff.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.